Greetings everyone, my name is Rejnols, and today I'm gonna be talking a bit about my experience going to the Danish WTC qualifier event, or Aroscon, as it is as called in Denmark. It's a tournament to determine who will be the captain for the Danish WTC team, which stands for World Team Championship. For some reason, the words were escaping my head. In general, it's a lot of teams, 32 teams to be exact. 32 teams going up against each other over 2 days for a total of 5 games for each person, and seeing who comes out on top. Now, if you are unaware of how a team tournament works, I'll go over that very shortly in just a little bit. But first off, let's just talk about me. Yes, I am the important person here. No, I'm not the important person here. Anyways, I went to the tournament with Custodes. I was playing with a team called Adeptus Shenanigans, and it was a really good time, first of all. I had a lot of fun. My legs are tired, and my soul is tired, and my brain is tired. And you know what? I think my dice were tired as well. No, but it was a really good time, and I was very happy that we got to join this team. So me and a friend, a guy I introduced to my local gaming club, was looking to go. Problem being, there was a week before tickets went on sale, and the tickets go away real quick. And we hadn't talked with anyone really. We don't know if anyone wanted us on their team. So we ended up reaching out to one of the guys who actually works at our local Games Workshop store, and he was one of the people who introduced me to the game, taught me a lot about the game. And we just asked him oh, do you guys have 2 spaces open? And they're like, yeah, actually we need 2 more people. So it was great. We got to join the team, and a bunch of good guys, and it was just a good time. It was just fun. It was a good time. That being said, this was my second ever tournament. My first tournament I ever went to was also a team tournament. But I went into that as a stand-in player for a stand-in team. So our whole purpose of being there in my first tournament was simply to get an even amount of teams at the event. And I was playing Salamanders back then, so I got my ass kicked, and I was still very new to the game. I didn't know what was going on or what I was doing really. So this was my first proper tournament that I went to. Anyways, with that out of the way, we can now talk a bit about what I was playing. So I was playing Custodes, and I made this little list for my opponents. I printed it out. No one even bothered to look at it, and honestly, I can tell why. Because why would they read through all of this stuff that I wrote down when they can just ask me? But I made this list, so I figured I'd just share it here in the video, because I can use this as talking points and go through it. But yeah, Custodes, obviously not a terrible faction. They were dang slang in the middle of the table when it comes to competitive win rate. What you usually will see is Custodes end up somewhere in the top 16-ish, the upper half, but never quite in the top quarters. So not never, but rarely in the top 8. Although, of course, sometimes a list goes through and takes it all. If you haven't played tournaments before, obviously player skill matters, faction power matters, but most of all, and don't get salty for this, luck also matters. If you go into 5 matches, which are all decent matchups for Custodes, then hell yeah, you can get top 4, you can win the whole thing. But if you go into 3 matches right away where you are on the back foot, either because they have better secondaries or a stronger army or rules that are better suited to deal with you, then sometimes you just lose because of that. In any case, went in with Custodes, figured I would maybe go with 2 wins, a draw here, and then some losses. That was my expectations, and we'll talk more how it turned out a bit later. I was of course playing Emperor's Chosen. I honestly hate playing Emperor's Chosen. It is simply it's so vanilla. Nothing they do is really oh yeah, this is fun, this is flavorful. It's just yeah, you got protection against mortal wounds, which is very important for Custodes because they die to mortal wounds like it was nobody's business. And then they get 1 reroll to hit or to wound whenever they activate, which is really good, but it's also really boring. But hey, going into a tournament, you kind of need to take what's best, unless, you're more experienced with something that's maybe not the best, in which case you can probably do as well. But I recognize that I am at best an average competitive player, so I figured it's probably a better choice to go with what's safe. For my army, it was, it's a bit of a mixed list. We have Trajan, a shield captain on bike. The shield captain on bike has the impregnable mind power, warlord trait. So he can deny 1 psychic power within 24, and he counts as double for objective controls alongside that 1 deny. And then he has 5 up feel no pain, warlord trait. And then finally he has Tip of the Spear, because Tip of the Spear is just really good. For my troops, I had 2 times 3 custodian guards with sword and shield. You can argue forever whether you should take sword and shields or spears, but if your primary goal with the guards is to hold objectives and stay alive, then the shields are better. +1 save, 0 up save and cover, and they have access to a stratagem, giving them -1 to hit in melee. It's just, they're just better. I don't think you can argue. It's 5 points more, but you get a lot more survivability. I also had 1 group of prosecutors, simply because I needed a 3rd troop choice, and was like, where can I spend these 60 points? And I was like, yeah, let's grab some prosecutors. I then brought 2 ×1 Venerable Contemptor Dreadnoughts. These are the plastic Dreadnoughts. They're just new models, came out for Horus Heresy. They have a multi-melta and a claw. They're just really good for their points cost. We had 1 Achilles Contemptor Dreadnought. This is the Contemptor Dreadnought with the spear. I haven't unpacked yet. This is the day after the tournament. I haven't unpacked yet. But this is the Achilles Contemptor. You can see he has the spear. And then this is the Venerable Contemptor Dreadnought, which has the multi-melta and the claw. And they're both really good. The Venerable Contemptor Dreadnoughts has the exact same defensive profile as the Forge World Dreadnoughts. They are a little worse in melee, but they're also a little better in shooting, depending on how you look at it. And they are 15 points cheaper. So they're just really efficient for their points cost, and I have fallen in love with them the more I've used them. I think they're really good, and I think that you can actually kind of get away with not having any Forge World Dreadnoughts, and just bring some of these instead if you don't want to spend the money on them. We then had 2 ×1 Alaris Terminators. These are literally just behind enemy lines, or drop down and hold a flag, or charge something to make them waste Overwatch robots. That is their purpose. Which is really sad, because Alaris Terminators are my favorite unit in the game. Well, not in the game maybe, but favorite unit in Custodes. They're just not that good. They're fine. That's what they are. They're fine. And being fine is just not good enough when you're paying 60 points per model. Then finally, to round out the list, we had 2 ×4 Virtus Praetors. I had 2 of them with salvo launchers, which is like kind of melta shots. And then 2 of them with hurricane bolters. So all in all, I had 4 salvo launchers and 4 hurricane bolters between the 8 bikes total. And I will admit, I probably should have just had 1 hurricane bolter in each squad. This would put me 5 points over 2,000 points, but then I'd have to find 5 points somewhere else. I could probably do it. Actually, no, never mind. The solution here would have been to have 2 ×3 Virtus Praetors. 2 of them with salvo launchers, 1 of them with hurricane bolters, and then maybe drop in another Alaris, or upgrade the guns on the Achilles Contemptor Dreadnought. But 2 ×4 bikes was a bit too much. They were a little bit hard to hide, and there was too much anti-infantry shooting. And yeah, I totally admit right here, right now, that I was skewing my list a bit too much into elves and like Sisters of Battle and anything that has a lot of 1 wound models. It did fine. It did fine, but I could have probably gotten away with just having 1. So that was my list. I don't think it's a bad list per se, but as I will mention more as we go through the matchups and my games, I think it was a bad list for a WTC tournament or a team tournament, and that has to do with the pairing process. So if you don't know about WTC tournaments and their format, it's quite simple, but still it's also a lot of fun and a lot of extra work actually. Because it's a team tournament, you don't play together. So it's not like it's my army and my teammate's army versus 2 of my opponent's armies. You're still playing individual games. But before any of the game starts, you go through something called a pairing. And pairings are each team puts out 1 defender secretly and reveals them at the same time. Now, we take their defender and we put out 2 attackers being in secrecy, and the opposing team does the same thing. Now, the opposing team gets to choose between the 2 attackers we gave them going into their defender. And we then do the same for the 2 attackers they put against our defender. You just repeat this process up until all the armies have been assigned. Now, this adds a lot more depth into just putting together a good team. Because let's just pretend, I'm not gonna go through it now because I'm tired, but let's just pretend that you had Necrons and Sisters of Battle and Space Marines, all right? Let's say these three factions are all bad into Drukhari and Death Guard. So if you have three factions that have bad matchups into two of your opponent's factions, then all of a sudden you need to figure out how can we pair our other factions into those two bad factions and leave our good factions into fighting something that I actually want to fight. In our case, our best list we brought on the team was a Harlequin list and a Sisters of Battle list, because those two are strong factions and they can go against more or less anything and still do quite decently. Whereas perhaps my Custodes going into Sisters of Battle, I mean, the Sisters of Battles will just outscore me. So my job on the team should have been to score as many points as possible and lose by as little as possible, or just just barely take the win. I shouldn't build a list that's trying to wipe the opponent off the board. Well, actually, I could have done that. What I did instead was I kind of made a list that was a little bit of both things, but not great at either of them. And especially for a team tournament at least, I should have leaned more into either trying to completely overwhelm my opponent or just completely securing 45 points in primaries and doing as good as I could and get as many points as possible just to make sure I don't lose by a lot. But that is my mistake. I messed up there in the list building, and that's something I've learned. Anyhow, so that's how the team tournament goes. You also don't use normal point scoring, use WTC point scoring. And basically it's intervals, right? So if I win by 70 points and my opponent loses by 50 points, I don't get 20 points. Instead, the difference between our scores is used to calculate how many points I get in the WTC format. So spoiler for my first match, but I do end up losing it, but just to show this. So my opponent won the first game. He won by 72 points against 63 points. This is a difference of 9 points, which in total gives him 11 WTC points and me 9 points. So he won the game 11-9, which is a very close game. So that's just a quick overview of how team tournaments work in the WTC format. Now let's actually talk about the first game. So day one was 3 games, and the first game I played was against Demons of Chaos Undivided. We were playing Recover the Relics. So this is Recover the Relics. And the rules for this mission is infuriating for a lot of armies because you don't get any CP if you don't hold a no man's land objective. Now what this means is that unless you have forward deploying units or pre-game moving units, if you go turn 2, you get no CP in turn 1. Because at the start of your opponent's turn, you don't have a no man's land objective. And at the start of your turn, you still don't have a no man's land objective. So for some armies that just don't have access to these things, you just don't get a CP at the start of the game. So you lose 2 CP out of the 10 CP you get throughout the game just for playing a wrong army on this mission. And anyway, that's why a lot of people don't like this mission. What is cool about this mission is that it is 6 objectives, but it is only hold 1, hold 2, hold more. So you don't need to hold 3 objectives to score 8 points, which makes it very easy to max out primary, even if you're just holding 2 objectives instead of 3 objectives. The secondary part of the primary, I'm never sure what we call this. It's called a progressive objective, but I'm not sure if people ever say that. In any case, you get 1 point for killing a unit. Very straightforward, pretty easy to get those 3 bonus points every turn because, it's Warhammer. We're killing stuff. So this mission has good parts and has bad parts. But anyways, that was the first mission. And I was playing against Demons of Chaos Undivided. His list was Be'lakor, a Bloodthirster with all the upgrades, which means he has 8 wound cap per phase. He gets +1 damage. And he has a 5++ feel no pain. He also brought Scarbrand, who is just like a Bloodthirster who doesn't have fly, but punches a lot harder. Well, I mean, the Bloodthirster already punches very hard, but Scarbrand just does it a little bit harder. And you had this champion Bloodletter guy. I'm not sure what he's called. He has like a cloak with skulls on it. And basically, he's just like a fighty character, and he ignores invulns against characters. Do remember that Be'lakor also ignores invulns, but that's against everything. And then he had like 60 Bloodletters. It was like... It was 4 characters and just Bloodletters. So I mean, at least he didn't bring flamers, but trust me, I encountered more than enough flamers later throughout the tournament. So our opponents here, they were nice guys, but they were I don't want to be mean, but they were old guys, right? My opponent seemed to have a pretty clear perspective of his rules. He had to look up things a few times, and there were some things we were talking about where it was like, no, it's actually like this. And he was like, are you sure about that? I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure about that. We looked it up, and yeah, I was correct about it. Again, I don't want to be like, well, actually. But it was clear that he was an old Hammer player, as some people say, and that he was used to some rules that don't work like that anymore, and in general, he was a fine guy, but he was definitely someone who showed up not to win the whole thing, but to just play with the things he likes. And it just so happens that the things he likes, which are demons, are pretty damn good right now. The game kind of went as I expected. I should have been able to tie this one if I had chosen some better secondaries. So for primary and secondaries, I ended up scoring 37 points on primaries. Don't think I could have done that much better. I scored 10 points on behind enemy lines. Don't think I could have done that much better either. 12 points on raise the banners. That's pretty good as well if you ask me. And then where I fell flat was no prisoners. Now his list wasn't like giving a lot of points out on no prisoners, but if you play Custodes, you know they have really bad secondaries. And I figured I'd rather just take 5 or 6 points for killing all the bloodletters, which I thought I was gonna do, rather than risk taking something where I could score a little bit more, but also perhaps score less. And then for him, he took 40 points on primaries, he took 10 points on reality rebels, which is the demon secondary where he has to be more units in more corners and a unit wholly within the middle. He took 13 points on raise the banners and then 9 points on grind them down. And I was like, if you had taken anything other than grind them down, you probably would have taken this victory a bit bigger. But he was pretty confident taking grind them down, and it was a tournament, so I was not going to go ahead and tell him like, I wouldn't take grind them down against Custodes. It is honestly very often that you go into a big group of Custodes and you think you're going to kill them all, and then just 1 or 2 is left over. That is kind of the Custodian thing to do, because you just need those 4-up invulns to peak one time, and then you're alive. Alright, so yeah, I already showed you the result earlier when I was talking about how to calculate WTC points. So he won the game by 9 points. By 9 points. Not a whole lot, and honestly, I think I should have lost this by a lot more, so I'm pretty happy with how this ended up turning out. Things that happened during the game, that is like important to note, I suppose, or fun to talk about. So he went for the turn 2 Warp Locus Deep Strike. So what that is that he uses 2 command points to teleport Be'lakor within 9 of my units, and then his bloodletters, he had 30 of them in Deep Strike. They can come within 6 inches of Be'lakor and 6 inches away from me. So it's basically a 6-inch Deep Strike where Be'lakor has to be 9 inches away to facilitate. And so turn 2, 30 bloodletters and his champion bloodletter guy, they came in, they charged 2 dreadnoughts and some troops. And he was like pretty happy with that. I was like, yeah, let's do it. He also used the Warp Storm ability to ignore movement penalties, so I couldn't throw Tanglefoot Grenade on them and make them harder to charge. So yeah, 6-inch charges around the board, just going in, boom, 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 boom. And he ended up doing like, he did 2 wounds to one of my dreadnoughts. I think he killed 1 troop. One of my shield guards, and then I think he did maybe 4 wounds to another dreadnought. And then on the clapback, I basically killed most of his squads and made him fail morale on a lot of them, and then I cleaned them up the turn after. So like my turn 3, they were gone. Like 30 bloodletters gone, and at that point I was like, this is it. We're gonna take this game. He just lost 30 bloodletters without doing absolutely anything. And then came the Bloodthirsters. One Bloodthirster was already fighting some bikes. I was so lucky on the first charge of the Bloodletter. He went into 4 of my bikes. He only killed 2 of them because on his sweep profile, he rolled 7 ones to wound. So that was pretty cool. But then Be'lakor came in, and the Bloodthirster started chewing through the rest of my bikes. And then Scarbrand came in, and I was like, whee, oh boy. Oh boy, these guys are kind of tough to remove because they remove things as fast as you get them to their wound phase cap, like and yeah, I couldn't kill all these demons. I managed to kill Be'lakor. Be'lakor was off the board either turn 4 or turn 5. I don't remember. I managed to kill Be'lakor. I got the wound capped Bloodthirster down to 7 wounds, and he had to fall back with him, and he was basically out of the game, but he was still there. which meant I couldn't push forward. And then Scarbrand came in and kind of started chopping things up. But yeah, I managed to put up a decent fight. And then instead of no prisoners, I could have maybe taken Bring It Down and then focus a bit more on chasing down those big guys because they get 4 points each on Bring Them Down. I could have maybe taken Assassinate because I killed the small guy and I killed Bellacore. That would have been 7 points. And even if I do take those, Bring It Down or Assassinate, I don't think the Demons player plays this any differently because he kind of needs to get up and score points with Reality Rebels. Get up in the corners and do things. And he also needs his characters to, well, go kill shit. So maybe we'll play differently. That's something you can always say and speculate about. I have a feeling that it would have turned out roughly the same, but that could have been an option, and with those 3 extra points, I might have been able to make it a 10-10 instead of an 11-9 in his favor. In any case, it was a decent first game. Obviously, it sucks losing the first game in a tournament. But I scored 9 points for my team, which was the most important part. I now realize that I probably didn't mention this, but so the way you win a round as a team at a WTC tournament is that you take the total amount of points that your team earned throughout these 5 games, and then the total amount of points your opponents earned, and compare them, and then once again there's a difference, and if your difference is big enough, your team wins, the enemy team wins, or you draw. So there's a total of 100 points throughout these 5 matches, 20 points per match. I scored us 9, he scored them 11. And then you count them all up when all the games are over, and you determine who wins, who loses, or if it's a draw. So that was game 1. Pretty decent, nothing horrifying, but our team won by quite a lot. We had some, the Sisters of Battle player and the Harlequins player on my team. They kind of wrecked the floor with our opponents. And I think it was me and one other guy on our team that lost our games, and the 3 other guys won their games. So overall, went pretty damn well, and we won by quite a lot. Which unfortunately meant going into our second round, where we were playing Tear Down Their Icons, we went into one of the top 5 teams at the event. Not only were they a top 5 team, but a lot of the players there was on the WTC team for last year's World Championship tournament, the official one. And even more weird about this, we traveled to the other end of the country to play in this tournament, and these guys play in the same club as we do. So we literally went across the country to play against people who we see on a weekly basis. In any case, going into this match, we were like, we're not gonna win this. We're gonna put up a fight. And you know what? We kind of did. We kind of did. Not really. But we tried. So I was against a guy I've played against before. He's a pretty decent player. I don't mind saying that he's better than me. As I said at the start, I am a completely average competitive player at best. And if nothing else, this guy has more practice than me and definitely knows more about matchups than I do. So he was playing Thousand Suns with Flamers. We were playing Tear Down Their Icons, which is, let's see, it's this mission where you have 5 objectives. It is hold 1, hold 2, hold more. You can place a bomb within your opponent's territory by doing an action, and then at the end of the game, if that bomb is still there, you score 4 victory points up to a maximum of 12. His list was Ahriman, 2 sorcerers, I forget their names, a Fate Skimmer, which is the siege demon on the chariot, 10 Terminators, 3x5 rubrics. I think 2 of the squads had flamers, maybe they all had. He then had 2x1 chaos spawn, and then he had 13 flamers of siege. Now a lot of people are scared about flamers, and for good reason. They're really scary. That being said, especially when he doesn't bring the +1 strength or the +1 wound character for the flamers. Against Custodes, the flamers aren't as bad because they're wounding on 4s or 5s. And if I have infantry in cover, I'm saving on 3s. So they're not completely horrible. They're still really fucking rough because it's still like 30 shots that gets thrown at you. But they're not as powerful as they are against, say, Space Marines, where they're just like, yeah, remove your squad now, please. Primaries and secondaries. I took 32 points on primaries, 7 points on Abhor the Witch, 9 points on Stand Vigil, and 7 points on No Prisoners. My opponent took 44 points on primaries, 7 on No Prisoners, 7 on Raise the Banners, and 12 on Mutate Landscape, resulting in a 70-55 victory to the Thousand Suns, or a 12-8 in WTC points. I was I was kind of tilted after this game because I could have done so much better, and my teammate, who is a Harlequins player, was also a Thousand Suns player, and for some reason, I just didn't think about asking him. I should have just asked him, like, what secondaries do I pick against them? Because in hindsight, Abhor the Witch is a bait. It's always a bait against Thousand Suns. I don't know why I took Abhor the Witch. I just did. So I was a bit like, I should have played this game into a 10-10, because this is not a great matchup for me, because you can teleport around, and despite me not caring as much about their mortal wound output, there still is a mortal wound output. And I'm not gonna remove 10 Terminators with -1 to hit, 4-up invuln, and I don't freaking know all those things. So it's not a horrible matchup for me, but it's perfectly playable. And yeah, I just didn't do good enough. I don't think I did bad, I just didn't do good enough. And so he was able to take the victory. What I basically did, I took my bikes, I took my dreadnoughts, and I said, go forward. And I made him stat check me, and that kind of worked. My target priority and how I moved them up the board should have been different probably, and my secondary choice. But I don't think I played the match wrong, per se. Because, yeah, turns out Thousand Suns have a hard time removing you when you ignore half of all their mortal wounds, because you just roll dice, and on a 4-up, you get 0 damage. But yeah, he was able to outmaneuver me and outscore me on both primaries and secondaries. But with a little change in how I played things and a little change in my secondaries, I should have been able to take this game. I forgot to mention, so in the Demons games, I went first, and in the Thousand Suns games, I went first. Now, if you ever played as Custodes or against Custodes, you probably know that Stand Vigil is a lot better when you go second. So Stand Vigil, if you don't know, is that you need to hold more No Man's Land objectives than your opponent at the end of the battle round. So it's basically Stranglehold, but a little bit worse if you go first. So basically, out of these 3 No Man's Land objectives, I needed to hold 2 of them. So I held this one and the middle for 3 turns, which gave me 9 points. And then when my dreadnoughts and bikes and everything else was like down here and fighting, he teleported the 10-man Terminator squad into the middle, and I didn't have anything to deal with them. And then I didn't get, I couldn't get, what do you call it? And then I couldn't get Stand Vigil for the rest of the game, because by the time my dreadnought and bikes were done killing what was OBSEC down here, he was then pushing on to this objective, and that was kind of just the end of me scoring Stand Vigil. Alternative way I should have played this match was, instead of having things push him down here, I should have just pushed things over here in the top half of the map. Because yeah, he can teleport something from down here over here, but if I'm pushing things over here, I'm just holding this half of the board, and I'm fine with that. I'm not super fast outside of my bikes, so if I can keep engagements within this like triangle up here, then that would be absolutely perfect for me. So yeah, as you can see, I've definitely learned something from playing these games. I didn't just go in and be like, well, I lost, shit, alright, let's do it again. But a lot of these things are things you think about after the tournament is done. Not just when the game is over, but like when the tournament is done, you take some time to sit down and reflect on these things. It becomes so much more clear. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say. So yeah, close match. Could have definitely made it at least a 10-10 if I had played better. But hey, I was pretty happy going into a player that, as I said, I am like almost definitely certain is better than me. And he's definitely, for sure, more experienced. And then came the last game of the day. At this point, I was obviously a little bit tired. We've been playing for, well, each round is 3 hours and 45 minutes, so that would have been 7.5 hours. 7.5 hours of just playing before this, and there's also been breaks. So all in all, we've been going for like 9 hours at this point. Round 3, Data Scry Salvage, one of my favorite missions when I'm playing this army, because god damn is it nice to have like a bike squad down here who can just move up and now threaten to take both of these objectives. And also just like having dreadnoughts actually be able to reach an objective within turn 2 is, it's a godsend. So this mission was really good for me. The mission is 6 objectives, hold 2, hold 3, hold more. You can do an action on your home objective, and for each No Man's Land objective you hold, you score 1 victory point up to a maximum of 3 per battle round. Now, my opponent was completely decent at the game, and absolutely like nothing wrong with the way he played. But he was a stand-in player who had been called in 3 days before the tournament. And while he did play every once in a while, he for sure wasn't like someone who had practiced to go to a tournament within the most recent months. So he brought a Necrons list, which is, you know, just bringing Necrons is good. But but it wasn't like a super optimal Necrons list. So he brought the big healing robot buff guy, I forget his name, but like the guy who could technically revive the Silent King's Miniers. He brought a Locust Destroyer Lord, one of the robots that gives out 5++ invulns, a robot guy who heals models, 2x5 Immortals, 2x4 Scarabs, 2x5 Wraiths, 1x5 Flayed Ones, 2x3 Heavy Locust Destroyers, and 1x3 Locust Destroyers. I might be missing something here, but like, in my head, Necrons are just like, okay, here's big robot. Here's big robot with slightly different gun. So there's some units that I might mix together, but it was for sure not a meta list. He didn't bring the Silent King. He didn't bring 15 Scarabs or 15 Wraiths. It was just like a middle ground of, you know, everything. Going into it, he took turn 1, which made me very sad, but which I would later find out was actually really good for me. The reason I was sad is that Necron scores their secondaries really easily and really fast. He was of course playing the OPSEC pre-game move Dynasty. Yeah, as I said, him going first actually meant that I had an easier time tabling him, which is really the only way I win against Necrons. I need to kill them before they score their points. So overall, on primary and secondaries, Necrons went first. He scored 38 on primary. He scored 38 on primaries, 7 points on Engage on All Fronts, 14 points on Treasure of Aeons, and 12 points on Ancient Machineries. For Treasures of Aeons, I chose this objective, and this objective. And for me, I scored 36 points on primary, 15 on No Prisoners, 13 on Raise the Banners, and 14 on Behind Enemy Lines, which resulted in a victory for the Custodes of 78 to 71, or 11-9 in WTC points. I was so happy I managed to beat Necrons. I told my teammates, I was like, yeah, I won against Necrons. They were like, you what? Because while I have all the killing power to kill Necrons, I don't have enough of it. As in, I don't have enough attacks, I don't have enough models, and they come back. But somehow, I managed to pull off the win. The reason I probably pulled off this win, 2 reasons. I had a squad of bikes that survived for 2 turns inside the enemy deployment zone. So I had a bike squad over here just fighting his characters and like Locust Heavy Destroyers and whatever else was left over here. And he spent a solid 2 turns shooting, fighting, and just couldn't kill them. And then the thing that changed the game from a 10-10 into 11-9 was my Dreadnought, who was over here making an 11-inch charge over to the objective to kill one of his characters. And with that, I was able to gain more primary points or deny him primary points. I don't quite remember. Either way, that ended up giving me the win of this game rather than making it a tie. It was a really fun game, and my opponent was really nice. Yeah, he was a nice guy. Fun game, and quite happy I managed to take a win there. Right, so to recap day 1, we lost, well, I lost my 2 first games, but our team, we won this match, or this round against the first team. We lost the round against the top 5 team. And then we ended up getting a draw against this team in total. So day 1, we had 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss, which was actually like way better than we expected. We were expecting maybe 1 win, 2 losses, or maybe even 3 losses. So day 1 was off to a great start. After the games, we kind of just went home, had a few beers, and went to bed. Because again, we've been playing Warhammer for like 12 hours at this point. And been standing up and running around for 13 or 14 hours. And over to day 2, not just for the tournament, but also for this recording, because I forgot to record the rest yesterday, so I'm continuing off now. Anyways, day 2 of the event, going into my 4th game, we were playing Conversion, and we were playing Necrons, who were using pretty much like your standard meta list, I believe. A shit ton of Scarabs, a shit ton of Wraiths, the Silent King, score packs, and a few characters. Here is the layout for Conversion. You have corner deployment, cut off by the middle circle, 5 objectives, hold 1, hold 2, hold more, and you get some bonus points if you hold 1 or more No Man's Land objectives, as well as even more bonus points if you hold the enemy's deployment zone, and you lose 1 victory point if you do not hold the objective marker in your own deployment zone. So going on yesterday's game against Necrons, I was feeling quite optimistic about this matchup. I knew that he would score a ton of points, but I knew that if I was lucky and did the right decisions, I would be able to squeeze out the victory or even just, make it a tie. Unfortunately, it turns out that the meta list is something that my list just, I don't think, can ever beat, especially because I took turn 1. And because I took turn 1, what he did was that he just took all of his stuff and put them behind walls. So the only things I could get to shoot at turn 1 was stuff like scarabs and a few wraiths. And for the scarabs, I kill 2 of them, then 1 comes back, or he revives it the next turn with his canoptic spider. So other than score me points on no prisoners, it didn't make any sense. And while you might argue that he cannot get out and do all his things turn 1 and score as many points, I still think it's more advantageous to me because that means I can most likely guarantee a charge on something and perhaps wipe it off the map turn 1. Whereas in this scenario where I had turn 1, I just simply couldn't kill off anything right away. And that kind of resulted in us just kind of brawling, but I couldn't get through all of his stuff. He scored way more points than I did. At the end of turn 4, I more or less was tabled. Now, I did find out after the game that my opponent had been quote unquote cheating a little bit. He didn't do it, he didn't mean to do it. It was just, he was an old school player-ish. He's played Necrons a lot, but he hasn't really been keeping super up with the rules and he hasn't played in a while. Turns out Silent King loses his auras and a few of his weapons in melee as he brackets. That probably only mattered for 1 turn, and what it would have changed was maybe give me 1 or 2 more points, which obviously still matters, and it sucks, it happens, but oh well, I didn't think about it either, so that's something for me to remember going into the future as well. But yeah, this was a bad game. I also picked some bad secondaries. I should have stuck with behind enemy lines, and rather than try and table him, just accept that I was gonna lose, and instead just try and score as many points as possible. So yeah, I went first. I scored 28 points on primary, 15 points on no prisoners, only 3 points on Stand Vigil. As I've already talked about before, Stand Vigil is just way better if you go second. So this was, of course, a bit of it was a tactical mistake by me because I'm going into Necrons where everything is OBSEC. So even if I count as 2, I only have 3 OBSEC units in total, with one of those being prosecutors. So that was just a mistake on my part. Raise the banners for 4 points. Again, raise the banners against Necrons on a 5 objective map where he can just touch the objective and then my banner's gone. That was a mistake by me as well. It worked fine in the 3rd game with raise the banners, but this was also a 6 objective map, so I could have 2 banners on 2 objectives throughout the entire game. Whereas here I would have 1 banner if I was lucky, and yeah, that's just my mistake picking bad secondaries. He ended up scoring 45 on primary. I did deny him Code of Combat because I was able to kill the Silent King, or at least make sure that he wasn't the one scoring the killing blows. And then he maxed out Ancient Machineries and Treasure of Aeons. Overall result, 79-50 to the Necrons player, and he won the game 15-5 in WTC points. So yeah, this game was a bit of a bummer. I should have done better, is all I can really say. And yeah, it was not awesome. It was not awesome starting the day in what I consider to be an okay matchup and then kind of getting destroyed. But there was one more game, and this one was even worse in terms of getting destroyed. I could say a lot of excuses here about why I lost, but it is the things to factor in. I was tired. I was real fucking tired, okay? It was my 2nd event ever. I was just tired. I made dumb decisions. I could have made this game a 5-15 at the very least by simply playing passively, but instead I was just kind of like, all right, let's just have fun in our last game, which would have been perfectly fine if I was a solo player, but this was a team event, and I kind of regret my decisions going into this game. But so be it. My opponent was super nice. He was very chill. A bunch of really great dudes for our last match, so at least that was good. The matchup was on the Scouring, and I was playing against Chaos Demons once again. Very similar list to what I played against, except for, I just kind of want to say this one is better. He didn't bring Scarbrand, but he had 2 Bloodthirsters, he had Be'lakor, he had a Changecaster, he had an Exalted Flamers, 12 normal Flamers, and then 30 Bloodletters. And oh boy, did I just make bad decisions all game, from the very start, choosing bad secondaries into choosing bad engagements. And one thing I did do that surprised my opponent was kill Be'lakor in 1 turn. Rendax is really good. The Martial Kata that Emperor's Chosen can get, or the preferred kata is Rendax, which is 6s against monsters and 6s to hit against monsters and vehicles auto wound, and +1 strength when charging or being charged or heroically intervening into a vehicle or a monster. And being able to have the 6s to hit auto wound for 2 turns, because you can take it 1 turn and then next turn you go into the other stance but count as having both active, gives you 2 turns of 6s to hit against monsters and vehicles auto wound. And with that I was just able to take down Be'lakor in 1 turn, and my opponent was quite surprised by that. That being said, if I could say one game where I was just playing bad, not just making bad decisions every once in a while, but in general just playing bad, this was the game. In the end, I took turn 1. I ended up scoring 30 points on primary, 1 point on no prisoners, 4 points on behind enemy lines, and 6 points on raise the banners. The reason I took no prisoners was because in my first matchup against the other demons player, I didn't score a lot of points on no prisoners either, but he threw them all at me, and I was just like, if that's just gonna happen again, I'll just take the 4 or 5 free points for no prisoners, because I don't really have that many other good options. It didn't turn out that way. He literally just kept all his blood letters in the back, denying me behind enemy lines, because I couldn't deep strike with my Terminators, and then he kind of just threw out the Bloodthirster and the Flamers alongside Be'lakor, and really that was enough to just stop me where I was. Yeah, ended up scoring only 4 points on behind enemy lines, and 6 points on raise the banners, because I was more or less tabled at the end of turn 3. He scored 41 on primaries, 15 on reality rebels, raise the banners, he got 12, and psychic interrogation, I was able to deny him twice. Well, actually, I denied him once, and then he double failed the second time. Because he rolled, I think he rolled perils on double 6, decided to re-roll it, and then roll the 1 and a 2. So hey, yeah, I denied him 3 points, but obviously I got my ass kicked. 77 to 41 or 17-3 in WTC points, with the demons taking the W. Oh yeah, I do want to note, so what I'm saying is when I make bad decisions this game, this map is really good for me. What I could do, in theory, what I could do, is I place a ton of stuff down here, a ton of stuff over here, place the banners, scan the objectives, which are strategic scan, because that's the mission, the end game objective of the mission. And then I just kind of throw things into the middle and either say, okay, you need to throw something in now and we need to trade. Otherwise, I get 12 points on primaries. Whereas what I did was I kind of just stacked up over here and kind of sent some stuff into the middle, some stuff down towards his deployment zone, or sorry, his objective by his deployment zone. And trading just went in his favor because, I mean, he has 3 greater demons who just tear through whatever they want. I don't get my 4-up invulns against Be'lakor, and even though I do get the 4-up invulns against the Bloodthirsters, they still hit really hard, especially when especially the one who has +1 damage on the sweep profile, so it's damage 3 on like, what, 12 attacks, 13 attacks? It's a lot, and he's re-rolling 1s from Be'lakor, and it is rough. But yeah, if I had played it the way I should have played it, where I just sit on these 2 objectives and then maybe throw some stuff into the middle saying, come on and kill this stuff, which you totally can, but then I can throw out some other stuff and, you know, we trade back and forth because I count as 2 on the objective, whereas you only count as 1. I could have probably made the game a 5-15, maybe even more at the very least. So yeah, I just played this match badly, and that's okay. That's what happens. That's okay. So at the end of the tournament, I went 1-4, with 2 of the games being big losses and 2 of the games being like small losses. Yeah, I had a good time at the event. Of course, I would like to play better. I would like to be more than a 1-4 player. In terms of individual performance, I scored 36 points total, which gave me 113th place amongst 160 players. Yeah, 103rd. So I was placed individually 113th out of 160, which is obviously not amazing, but it's not the bottom 25%. So I mean, yay. But yeah, let's just pretend that I went 5-15 in my demons game, and then I would have 38 points. That would bring me up to somewhere around 109, 110th place. Yeah, overall, I was a bit disappointed in my own performance. But it was still a really good time. I had fun. I learned a lot. In terms of some quick, like, closing thoughts, Custodes, I think, in WTC format can be a solid defender, but you need to focus on maxing primaries. Secondary play is gonna be pretty bad for you unless you get a good matchup. So you really just want to make an army that can guarantee that you max out your primaries. You can either do that by playing super passively and just taking raise the banners, maybe stand vigil depending on the matchup, and then just kind of sit back and be like, either we go 10-10 or you're gonna have to come to me. My mistake was simply playing too much of a I need to kill my opponent to win the game, which I might need to do in a singles tournament, but in a team tournament, I don't need to win my games. I just need to not lose by a lot. So if you're going to a team tournament, I think it is important to focus on maxing primary, either by going a full like kill list, like, you know, free grav tanks, 5 dreadnoughts, and just throw that at your opponent, or by going the other way, as I said, and go heavier on troops and just have like, you know, okay, I'm not gonna kill you, but I'm OBSEC, I count as 2. I am slightly, like, you're not impossible to remove, but you're quite hard to remove compared to other factions from the objectives. I think that's the better way to go. Yeah, my second point here is my build was too balanced. I had like a little bit of troops, a little bit of kill units, a little bit of everything, whereas I should probably just skew my list to go the one or the other way. Should either go full on kill or full on passive objective holding focus. I feel like 2 of the games I played could have been made a tie with some better secondary picks. The first Demon game as well as the Thousand Suns game. So the 2 first games, I feel like if I had played a little bit better and chosen some better secondaries, I could have gotten a 10-10 instead of a 9-11 and an 8-12. I did bring 1 unit of prosecutors for cheap OBSEC holders, but they're just not worth it. You sneeze on them and they die. Unless you have exactly 60 points left over and everything is upgraded, I am not gonna bother bringing prosecutors. The utility they bring in terms of -1 psychic powers and giving you access to a deny just comes in so rarely. It's only an 18-inch bubble, and they are cheap objective holders, so they're usually in the back, which means they're never within 18 inches of any psychers. So yeah, I think like I just cut prosecutors from my list unless I have 60 points left over and literally nothing else to spend them on. As I think I mentioned at some point during this freaking like hour-long video by now, Jesus Christ, that's such a long video. I don't think my list is bad, but I don't think it's great for a team tournament. For an individual tournament, I could totally see you going 2-3 or 3-2 using a list something like this. But in a team tournament where there's pairings and like strategic matching, be like, I want to go against the Custodes player because I know he doesn't have any good secondaries against me and I know I can kill him. Whereas in a singles tournament, it's just like, well, here's player A, here's player B, who knows their faction, yup, go play. And with that, I think I can conclude my thoughts on my WTC event. Thank you so much for watching if you made it through this entirely too long video, but hey, it's Warhammer, there's a lot to talk about. 5 whole games, and if you did make it through the whole thing, go ahead and leave a comment below and be like, yeah, I listened to this for an hour while I was doing something else, because that would be real cool. Thank you for watching. Feel free to leave a comment below with your own thoughts or your own experiences going to a team tournament with Custodes or anything else, and I'll see you whenever I see you. Alright, take care.